Welcome to the Permission Slip podcast, where I, empowerment coach, mindset expert, and holistic nutritionist Carmen Oling, share with you the tools, conversations, and resources you need to write your own permission slip, take massive action, and become obsessed with your own life. Let's get started.
In Cal Newport's book, Deep Work, he states, and I 100% agree that most of us suffer from this. So he states, spend enough time in a state of frantic shallowness, and you permanently reduce your capacity to perform deep work. So here is the first step that I want you to consider in your life to be able to do focused work more often. And that is get fucking clear and stop complicating everything. There is clarity in simplicity, and that's what we're going for here. Welcome back to the Permission Slip podcast. Thank you so much for being here and tuning in each and every week. This week, we're continuing our conversation on the one thing that you can do to stress less, get more done, tap into that flow state, our highest self, and just be overall happier. So if you missed last week's episode 72, I encourage you to go back and listen to it, because the one thing that we are talking about is focus. Now, last week we defined focus as the ability to keep your awareness on one thing for an extended amount of time. And I gave you a little homework. To start collecting evidence and become super self-aware. But again, just being a witness of what's going on in your life, not a judge. Because often when we're looking at making a change or growth in our life, we get so super critical, and that just complicates things. And we want it to be simple. So we just want to be a witness of what's happening and start collecting evidence around our environment, our actions, our thoughts, our worries, our health, that sort of thing. What types of things in those categories are making you unfocused? And then on the flip side of that, what types of things are making you focused? So I too did this homework in my life, because yes, there are periods of my life where I do get unfocused and I'm distracted. And so I found 4 things were the top things that really made me unfocused. And I know that some of you will be able to relate to some of these, maybe even all of them. And I want to hear what you found in your life too. Let's continue this conversation. Send me a DM with what you found in your life, or post it on your stories with a link to this episode. I would love to hear what you're figuring out in your life is distracting for you. And once you figure that out, you'll be able to take the steps to change it, right? So for me, the number one thing is if I'm not being clear on anything in my life, if I'm not being clear on my intention for the day, if I'm not being clear on the one thing that I really want to focus on and get done for the day, if I'm not being clear on my overall vision, if I'm not clear on how to show up as my highest self or what that even looks like, if I'm not clear, it's so easy to get distracted. The second thing, and I know you all can relate to this, is social media. So I love social media because it's such a wonderful way to be able to connect with so many people that I wouldn't normally be able to connect with. But when you get into that scrolling, and I think one of the biggest things I do is I look at other people that are inspiring me in their business, and they're doing something wonderful in their own way. And oftentimes I'll be like, oh, squirrel, that sounds fun. Maybe I should do that. And I have to remember, pull myself back and just stick to my zone of genius, my intention, where I'm at and what I'm focusing on. So social media can be a big distraction for me. The next thing is if I get into an energy and a space of over controlling or overthinking, that's so distracting for me. Anytime that I get into where I feel like I'm in that state of overthinking or worrying or control, I like to just stop myself immediately and totally reframe where I'm at. I just recognize, again, without being a judge, just witness. I recognize that these thoughts are not of my highest self, and I choose again. I say that out loud, or I'll say that in my head, and then I choose something that matches up with my highest self. And now the fourth thing that I've found is lack of organization or planning or delegation. Now, I'm not talking about white knuckling and controlling outcomes on everything here. What I'm talking about is having my home organized, having my desk organized, having my thoughts organized, being intentional before I show up to do something, having my communication with my team organized, making sure I'm not trying to do everything on my own, asking for help and delegating, and then letting go of all of the outcomes and just knowing that all the right things will come to me that are meant for me. They won't pass me. So those are the four things that I find get me unfocused the absolute most. So I want to share with you something of a book that I've been reading recently. It's called Deep Work by Cal Newport. And I'll put a link in the show notes for it. But he states, and I agree like 100% that most of us suffer from this. And he says, spend time in a state of frantic shallowness, and you permanently reduce your capacity to perform deep work. Wow. And when he refers to deep work, he's referring to focused work, right? And just like we talked about last week, an unfocused state oftentimes is doing busy work, things that don't actually move the needle, things that do not matter. Like we're focusing on that so much, and we can't figure out why we can't get things done, why we can't reach our goals, because ultimately we're focusing on the things that don't matter because we're not clear on where we want to go. He also says about deep work, and again, he's referring to focused work, and he refers to social media and the internet and says these network tools are distracting us from the work that requires unbroken concentration while simultaneously degrading our capacity to remain focused. Oh, wow, right? And that's so true because once we lose the focus muscle, we have to work to build it up. So something that I want you to know, just like I said earlier, is be a witness of when you're doing a really good job of staying focused. Be proud in that moment. Make a note of it. Remember it. Collect the evidence. Write down what's happening around you, within you, what you're doing, how clear you were, how intentional that you were. And then be a witness of when you're unfocused too, and keep track of that. And you can start building up this muscle. So in the book, Cal also refers to the founder, Jason Fried of Basecamp. And in 2007, Jason announced that he was going to be doing with his company and with his team an unheard of experiment. So he was shortening his work week for his team, for him and his team, from 5 days to 4. And now back then, the media was super critical of this decision. However, what they found was pretty amazing. And I want you to listen. And I'm going to read to you from the book a quote from the founder of Basecamp that Cal put in his book, Deep Work. And this is what he says about shortening the work week from 5 days to 4. Very few people work even 8 hours a day. You're lucky if you get a few good hours in between all the meetings, interruptions, web surfing, office politics, and personal business that permeate the typical workday. Fewer official working hours help squeeze the fat out of the typical work week. Once everyone has less time to get their stuff done, they respect that time even more. People become stingy with their time, and that's a good thing. They don't waste it on things that just don't matter. When you have fewer hours, you usually spend them more wisely. Okay, mic drop. Podcast is over. Just kidding. But wow, right? It's so fucking true, though. I also linked in the show notes an article in INC magazine, so Inc. magazine, if you haven't checked that out and you are a boss babe, like it's a great magazine, but that the founder of Basecamp wrote about why he's giving his whole team a month off. So I encourage you to definitely hit up the show notes and read that article too. Let me know what you think for sure. So I know you're probably thinking, this is all great and wonderful, Carmen, and like all these things that you just shared, but like, how do I do this in my life? How can simplify it for me? And if you're not thinking that, BS, yes, you are. We all want to know how we can take things that we've learned, simplify it, and put it into our life. I think that's really like my life's work, because we all try to overcomplicate things. So here's the first step in being able to do more focused work more often. Ready? Get fucking clear and stop complicating absolutely everything. There's clarity in simplicity, and that's what we're going for here. So I have 3 questions, and so you'll need pen and paper, or like mark this if you are driving right now, take a screenshot so you know where you're at with this, or whatever you need to do to see where you're at to be able to come back to these questions. So 3 questions to ask yourself so you can gain some clarity around how you can be more focused. The first one is more self-awareness. So number 1 is, how am I showing up in my life? And be honest here. Rip off the Band-Aid. Call yourself out on your own BS. That's so powerful. Again, it's not critical. It's not good or bad, black or white. It's about being a witness. Okay, when this happens, this is how I respond in my life. And that's something that I think I'm going to change. So the second thing, and this is so fun to do if you've never done this exercise before, ask yourself, how do I show up when I'm operating from my highest self? So how do you know what your highest self is? It takes time for you to sit down and for you to visualize that. What do you wear every day? Who are you talking to? What are your daily rituals? What is your communication like? What are your relationships like? Where do you go? What places do you visit? Do you see where I'm going with this? Visualize your highest self. And then you can answer this question. How do I show up every day as my highest self? Now, if you want some more help on this, I do have a free worksheet that you can download. So hit up the show notes again, download the highest self worksheet, work through it, and you can gain so much clarity on this, because again, we all want to be in that flow state where we are tapping into our higher self more often, but you can't get there if you don't know where the there is, if you're not visualizing what that is and then putting that into action every day. And then the last thing is a daily journal prompt that you can use once you've gotten clear on how you're showing up currently, how you want to show up. Now we're going to be very intentional each and every day to focus on showing up as your highest self and focus on the things that matter most to you. Because most of the time, the things that we're talking about that are overwhelming us or stressing us or that are on our plate, that it's not that there's too much there. It's just that we're not clear on what we want and how we want to show up. So we try to be everything to everyone all of the time. And that's just fucking exhausting. And so we want to start showing up for ourselves and for the people, places, things that are most important to us, not just the quote unquote busy work. So each day you can answer these questions for yourself. What will make today meaningful? And then how do I want to feel? So what will make today meaningful and how do I want to feel? Do you notice that neither one of these questions are focused on a certain action or a certain outcome, but they're focused more on showing up as your highest self? Because that's what's underneath that, right? Is doing meaningful work, living a meaningful life where you're thriving because you feel good each and every day. That's what these two questions are based on. And if you can base your daily actions off those two things, you're going to be able to do so much more focused work. You're going to focus on the things that matter, not all the fluff. So that's it for this week's episode. Again, take the time to ask yourself these questions. Take the time to consider how you're showing up and how you want to visualize your highest self. And then start taking the action every day to live a meaningful life that feels good instead of just surviving. We want to be thriving in the areas that matter most to us, so we can stress less, get more done of the things that actually fucking matter, tap into that flow state, and just be so much happier each and every day. So next week, we're going to wrap up our focus series, and you're not going to want to miss it, because I'm going to talk to you about how you can set boundaries and how you can make sure that you are always taking care of yourself. So you won't want to miss it. And as always, I am so grateful for you joining us here on the podcast. And I just want to say thank you. This week has been all about gratitude for me. I've been doing so many gratitude posts, and it's felt so good. So if you're feeling a little off today, give thanks for something in your life. It'll uplift you each and every time. So thank you for listening to this episode on Focus, and have a super blessed week. I will see you next week, and we'll talk about focus again.